Right. Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us, everyone. And you're very, very welcome. And it's wonderful to have you here. Um, Thank you again to Emmanuel, who is co-hosting today with me. You might have heard he's in London, but originally from Nigeria. Thank you, Emmanuel. So today's workshop then is the beginning of a series of 3, and it's linked to our new course, which is questioning in the classroom. This is workshop 1. So today we're going to have a think about questions in the context of teaching and their purposes, why we use them, and how powerful they can be, how effective they can be. We're going to think about the purpose of questions inside and out of the classroom, why we use them, what purposes we use them for, and how we can use them as a learning tool, how we need to be more mindful of questions and questioning as educators. So before we start, I've got a little quiz for you, and I'm going to ask you why. Ask your opinion first of all. Why do we ask questions? And if you could put in the chat box what you think, whether it's A, to check for understanding, B, to vary our lesson delivery, C, to challenge negative behaviour, or D, to encourage critical thinking. So I'll give you a little bit of thinking time while you have a look at those options and put what you believe is the purpose for asking questions in the chat box. And welcome Ansonia, also from Trinidad. Melissa, hair, nails and makeup. Emmanuel, you're absolutely right.
Lovely.
Clyde, thank you. So you believe we ask questions to check for understanding, to encourage critical thinking. And yes, Alex, absolutely, you can put more than one. Sarah, to encourage critical thinking. I think that's a key aspect for our teaching and learning. Again, Ansonia, you've put A and D, checking for understanding, encouraging critical thinking, that higher order skills. Nabira, A, B, C, and D, fabulous answer. Thank you very much. All of the above. I totally agree with you. It is all of the above. As educators in the classroom, we are using all of these questions quite often in our classroom. Emmanuel, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, it's lovely to see the responses in the chat box, and I want to agree with every response here because teaching, there's no one way to teaching. Teaching is something dynamic and depending on context and culture and environment. So, but obviously, we could see that questioning is an important tool for teaching because when you bring in questioning, it opens the classroom setting, to various or diverse viewpoints, where you don't just see the teacher as the dispenser of knowledge, but again, he's more like a coach. And then you watch your students, participate, make their contribution, and then you can guide effective learning from that perspective.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. That's some really insightful information there. Thank you, Emmanuel. So here we go
When you
then. Uh,
leave it the way
can I ask you to mute
15,
your microphones,
yes,
please?
we
Thank
cannot,
you.
nothing.
Okay, so questions and purposes then to see if students understand, to start a discussion, to evaluate what is important, encourage students to think and reflect upon work independently, those critical thinking skills. So for those of you who put all of those options, you're absolutely right. We do use questions in the classroom for many, many different purposes. What we do need to think about is that when a young person is faced with multiple questions, it actually can become quite overwhelming for adults as well, I believe. I know when lots of people ask me lots of questions, it becomes too difficult to manage them all, to answer them all. And as a teacher, when I'm in my classroom, I have to really be careful about the number of questions I'm asking to my students and the way I'm using questions towards my students. It can be quite intimidating for young people. So we do need to be very aware of what we're doing, our vocabulary, our sentence structures, and what we're doing. So one of the first questions I ask my students is how their day is going, because I believe that that really helps develop relationships between myself as a teacher and my students. It fosters the positive relationships, which then helps my lesson to be more successful. Another reason we use questioning, again, to check understanding from previous learning. That's often the method I use to start my lesson. I do a quick recap, and then I can vary my question styles to suit the different attainment levels of the students I have in the classroom in front of me. I would start with basic recall, and then start increasing the question styles to asking students to explore and evaluate the different themes that we've been studying. And again, using questions to focus students. Occasionally, I see the odd student in my classroom maybe drifting off, maybe losing focus or concentration. So then I call upon those students just to refocus them, to remind them that they're in a learning situation, and I use it as a behavioural strategy as well. So questioning, there's lots of different purposes and reasons why we use them. But what we do need to understand is the difference between good questions and not so good questions. Emmanuel, would you like to go through that part of things for me?
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, again, when we talk about questioning, it's important to make it clear. The clarity of a question is as important as the question itself. So whether from the teacher or from your students, you need to understand the point from which they're asking, their question. And then when we talk about questions, questions could come in different ways. A child, a student in class may want to ask question outside what the focus for the day is. Okay, but again, as a teacher, you're to guide learning, so you don't allow that to take you off, the curriculum or what the task for the day. But again, like you mentioned earlier, that's no bad question. That's no stupid or silly question. Before a child asks a question, that's what is important to that child. And again, we should allow students to ask whatever questions they want to ask, even though we may think they are not relevant. Because as a teacher, that helps you to pick that student from where he is. Okay, it shows you the level, the entry level of that student, and then you'll be able to place that student where he should be so you could have the class um, together. And that is very important. Again, questions are also used to broaden knowledge, to extend learning. And that is very important, for me. So we ask questions, we allow questions. And then, by the way, when we talk about questions, it's not just you, the teacher, asking questions, because if you dominate the question session, then the aim is also defeated. So the idea about question in a classroom setting is to allow students to express their multiple viewpoints so we can, carry them along, engage them and make sure that effective learning is enhanced. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Emmanuel. Thank you very much. And I think it's also important to think about who can ask questions in a classroom, because instantly we assume that it can just be students asking teachers, teachers asking students. But I think students asking each other and doing some peer learning and discussing topics is just as important as teacher requiring knowledge, as teachers as students requiring help. And I've just noticed in the chat box, thank you very much, Chiobi Blessed Nwanko, sorry, my pronunciation, but you're absolutely right. No question is irrelevant. Students should be allowed to ask multiple questions. I agree, and they should feel secure and they should feel supported in the classroom in order to do that. It's the best way that they can further their learning. So it's not only teachers who can ask the questions, and we should encourage all the time our students to ask them. It might be hard for some students to ask questions. They might lack confidence, especially if there's a lot of students in the classroom. They might feel it's embarrassing, but we need to celebrate questions. We need to support them to research, to think about things, and to not be afraid to ask questions. However, minimal or however open the question may be. It's an important skill, an important life skill as well, to be brave, to develop confidence, to question things going on, to question things to further understanding. So asking lots of questions, I think Emmanuel referred to this. It's actually a good thing. It doesn't mean our teaching is bad. It's just engaging. The students are engaged. They're interested in what they're learning. They want to know more. So I'm just going to pause for a second and we're going to show you a video that Tandy, one of our ambassadors, has contributed to. And it's actually in our questioning in the classroom course. So you could look at it and listen to it a little bit further. See what you think.
Here are some ideas that can promote students to ask questions.
Think, pair, share.
Students might be more confident asking just one person a question. You could give students a question to answer, and they could turn to their partner and answer it together. They will possibly ask each other questions like, "What do you think?" Small group discussions. By placing students into groups of 3 to 4, you could give students a short list of questions that they need to ask each other. In other words, you are prompting the questions. Create a question. Students could write a question they have on a topic that you are teaching them. For example, if teaching about subtraction,
The volume's quite low. I've
you
put
could
mine up
ask the
as far
students
as I
to
can.
write one question.
I'm just going to see if I can get it up any higher, and then we'll go back to it. I do apologise. Technical issues.
Yeah, I think some of them can still hear, just like me here. I can also still hear that. Will suffice fine if you can increase that.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for confirming, Emmanuel.
You're
Here we go.
Here are some. Create a question. Students could write a question they have on a topic that you are teaching them. For example, if teaching about subtraction, you could ask the students to write one question for their partner to complete. Quiz their partner on what more they would like to know about a topic. For example, if teaching about the history of India, you might ask students to decide in their pairs one question that they would like answered by the end of the topic. Create their own end of topic assessment questions. You may or may not use these, but it will give an idea of what the students feel confident being asked. Set up a question box. At the front of the classroom, create a question box. Students can anonymously write their question on a slip of paper and place it in. They might do it after the lesson as well as during. You can then read it afterwards and plan when to answer it. What was the question? If you write the answer on the board, you could ask students, what was the question? Use closed questions to work out something. For example, you could ask students to think of a famous Caribbean author. Nominate one student to come to the front and decide an author. They keep this to themselves. Other students have to ask questions with a yes or no answer to try to work out who the author is. Sometimes students ask questions that we simply don't know the answer to. And that is okay, as we can't know everything. Saying something like, let me come back to you with an answer to that.
Rather than making up an answer is always a better strategy.
So now that we've got a few strategies that Tandy has shared with us, which comes from our questioning in the classroom course, I'm going to ask you to put a definition of open and closed questions in the chat box, please. Can you tell me the difference between an open question and a closed question? Sarah, that's a lovely comment. Celebrating questions in my classroom has empowered my learners. They always have something to talk about and it's constructive. That is really positive because that's exactly the point that we're trying to make with this workshop, that questioning is a form of learning, it's a form of exploration. So that's fantastic. Well done. Anybody brave enough to share the difference between open questions and closed questions? And Sonia, thank you. Open questions leave room for varied responses. Yes, the clues in the word open, and closed is a one-word answer, yes or no. There's either a right answer or a wrong answer. Clyde, thank you. An open question requires students' point of view. Let's just jump to closed questions as yes or no. Absolutely. Hugh, an open question solicits expounded responses, while closed questions a specific response. You're absolutely right. Thank you, everybody. And I think it's important that we use a mixture of both open and closed questions so that we're catering to the different attainments abilities in our classroom. I think sometimes if we start with closed questions, it's quite easy. Well, not easy, but it's a straightforward way for students to, and for teachers to assess understanding, to assess learning, whereas open questions require a higher order of thinking, more critical, evaluative thinking. Well done, everybody. There they are. Closed questions, brief answers, often right or wrong, good for recalling knowledge. Whereas open questions, they're a really strong learning tool. They promote discussion, debate, reflection. The most important way we should be using questions is to further the learning of our students. Emmanuel, would you like to add anything to that, open and closed questions?
Yeah, our responses are absolutely great, and I want to appreciate her work in making it clear that in questioning, sometimes the teacher is not or do not have a monopoly of knowledge. Sometimes you have students ask questions, and I'm talking about open questions. And just because you feel you're the teacher, you know, shouldn't mean you give a wrong response, or you want to create impression students shouldn't see me, since they believe I'm the embodiment of knowledge, as our teacher don't know this. So, but like she mentioned, bringing in questioning in our class as a tool, there are activities like she mentioned in the videos we can bring in, whether you talk about think, share, or you talk about turn talk, group discussion, and all of that are interesting activities that can actually help, broaden our learning in class. And then we don't just make our questions. I think the mixture of both is important. You don't make up your questions to be just closed questions or open questions. You may put up some closed questions you want to ascertain or confirm learning at whatever formative stage. But again, it's important to allow students to ask questions, beyond the boundary of your class discussion. You want them to feel free to express themselves as how best they could. And that is actually important because, again, like for me as a teacher, that's the name because I'm trained. But again, I consider myself a learner whenever I'm in class, because you never can tell. Most times I learn a lot from these students because they come from different home backgrounds. Some of them, their parents are also professionals in their different fields, and they come to class. So I also see it as an opportunity for me to build And it can help a teacher to improve your teaching portfolio. You see areas you need to make up and all of that. So in general, it's good to go with birds, but close and open questions that it helps both the teacher, it's herself, and the students as learners in class. Thank you.
Yeah, Emmanuel, I'd like to take you up on that as well, because that's a really good point. The first thing is, I think it is important for students to understand that we don't know everything. We're guiding them through their knowledge, through their
Sure.
learning, but we don't have all of the answers. And I think that's not a bad thing to show our students that we are also learners and we can learn not just as much, but we learn from our students. And I think that really supports the relationship between student and teacher as well, and therefore the learning, and that's important. So thank you very much for that. Okay, little test then, everybody. Which of these are open questions and which of these are closed? Please, can you put your answers in the chat box? Let's see if you were paying attention. Sarah, that's a lovely comment. Thank you. Something that you're taking home today is that asking questions and how they are to build good relationships sets a foundation of how successful the day can be. Absolutely, Sarah. I totally agree. I love to check in with my students when they enter the room, just to make them feel secure, to make them feel good and ready for learning, to establish the fact that they're now in an English lesson and they're with me, and this is how we do lessons in my classroom. It might be different to another classroom. So that's fantastic. Clyde, 1, 3, 4, and 7, which is open and which are closed then? 1, 3, 4, and 7 are open. You've got it. Fantastic. How are you today? Yes, is open. Why are you behaving that way? Open. It requires an explanation. What do you think the character might do? There's a bit of exploration, a bit of higher order thinking going on there. And how do I do this, miss? So an explanation is required. Lovely. Thank you, Clive, for sharing the answers there. That's great. So reflection, Emmanuel, I'm going to ask you to do the reflection, ask everybody to think about a few things from today.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from, maybe you want to send a chat. The use of question can be, like we've discussed, a powerful tool to improve learning, which is the ultimate goal of teaching in our classroom. And we must not overuse questions. Questions can be used strategically. Yeah, so we could use questions, like you mentioned earlier, to introduce a lesson. We could use questions to probe understanding, to check previous knowledge. And then we could use question in class for assessment, to find out where to place students, and how we could further break down our learning objectives so we can carry our students along. But again, it's important we understand that questions are not just a tool for teaching students. We must remember, our colleagues too. So questioning goes beyond the classroom. That's the point I would like to emphasize. It's not just when the teacher is first in the students. There should be a relationship in class, that though it could emanate in class, but it extends beyond the class, where students can ask, you of the class question, or their colleagues, those in similar stage grades, but maybe in different class. And then also for the teachers, the staff room. Okay, so we could also take questioning beyond the classroom, but for the teacher and for our student learners. So because when we build that community, okay, it actually helps. It helps learn. It helps us to learn from, like I mentioned earlier, diverse viewpoints. We get different perspective, and all of this together is what makes the body of knowledge. And then it's also important to remember, to gently check in with colleagues, ask if they may need support or could provide you with support. Like we mentioned earlier, no teacher knows it all. So we could be right there. So we could share with colleagues, invite those who think can offer support. It could be your class, but you can invite a colleague, give him a slot, 5 minutes, few minutes. Can you respond to their question? Can you ask Mr. B question? He's in class today and all of that. So that's important. And when we do so, we create not just a consciousness, a culture of questioning among our students. It builds bravery in them, it builds confidence in them, so students can actually challenge knowledge. They could ask question, they have the research mindset. They want to know why 1 + 1 is 2, why this plus this is this, so they want to know why. And altogether, it kind of gives us, it helps our students, or helps us build students that produce evidence-based learning, that students could know it's not just that 1 + 1 is 2, but this is why it is so. So in general, I think that's the idea. And if we allow questioning in our class uses as a tool, to develop activities, that could help both the teacher and our students in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. That was a lovely reflection upon questionings and questionings as a powerful learning tool. So to sum up then, questioning, be mindful of your questions, think about how you are using them, how many you are using them, and to what purpose, because they are important and they can be a strategy for learning and for furthering your students. Is there anybody who would like to add anything more, whether it's in the chat box or whether you would like to unmute yourself and contribute to this topic? Now's the time. Does anybody use questioning quite obviously in their classroom in a very explicit manner? Or is there a type of teaching style you use or strategy that allows you to focus on questioning? Anybody like to contribute?
Yes, please. I want to make a contribution.
That's wonderful. Hello, Idira.
This is Ebere, and I am an online tutor. So I want to share something that happened recently in my online class. I have a lot of students from different parts of the world, and I had finished delivering my lesson, and a particular student asked a question. And having this workshop, I appreciate what happened in class that day. I gave my own point of view and I made it open. I said, if any other person have a different perspective, please feel free to share. And I got different points of views. At the end of the day, I learned quite a lot. So I really agree that we learn from our students. We do learn. So I really appreciate this workshop, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that contribution. It has really brought to the forefront that questions are quite purposeful, and we need to remember that as well to help us support our learning and our students' learning as well. Questioning is important, and I'm really glad that it's helped you consider it in a different way. Thank you. Hugh, in the chat box, it is a really powerful tool. You're absolutely right to use before a teaching session and throughout. It prepares the learner, sets the tone to maximise the learner teaching process. Yeah, you agree with me, Hugh, because that's how I start my lessons. I set the tone as they arrive, remind them of which classroom they're in and what our routines and consistent procedures are. So yeah, you're very similar to me. Powerful tool. We do have a questioning course that we've released on Teach 2030. So you will get a certificate if you work your way through it. And we do have a competition that your students can take part in, which is called One Big Question. Please have a look on Teach 2030. It'd be lovely to get some more people who would like to get involved in that. And again, work through the different videos, the different sections and the different aspects of questioning. Thank you, Emmanuel, for co-hosting with me today. It has been wonderful to hear your perspective and your contributions.
Thanks, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
And thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. I'm going to close now, but I would love to see you again on our session 2 on questioning, which takes place in a month's time, November the 25th. Sarah's going to be co-hosting with me, another ambassador, which I look forward to very much, and we will explore questioning in more detail. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to close now. Goodbye. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.